In a moment destined for the history books, the eyes of the nation turned to the Supreme Court as anticipation and uncertainty filled the air. The Supreme Court has delivered a landmark decision, one that will echo through the halls of government and the lives of everyday Americans. The highest court has blocked President Trump's sweeping plan for new tariffs on imported goods, halting a policy that promised to reshape the nation's economic landscape. This is more than a legal ruling, it's a political earthquake, shaking Congress, Wall Street, and the world. The decision sent shockwaves through financial markets and government institutions alike. The decision redefines the balance of power in the U.S. government, questioning the president's authority over the nation's economic destiny, and reaffirming the vital role of Congress in shaping trade policy. Global leaders and markets watched anxiously, as the proposed tariffs threatened a new, even larger global trade war. The world braced for the ripple effects of America's internal struggle. Alliances and supply chains hung in the balance, with the future of global commerce at stake. Every shipment, every contract, every job was suddenly uncertain. The case pitted the executive's desire for swift action against Congress's constitutional authority, igniting a fierce debate over the limits of presidential power. The core question: who controls American trade, the president or Congress? This fundamental issue lay at the heart of the nation's economic future. The Supreme Court's answer sets a powerful precedent, limiting presidential authority in a fragile global economy and sending a clear message about the separation of powers. For Americans, the stakes were real: higher prices, business uncertainty, and the fear of what tomorrow might bring. Jobs were on the line, as workers and families wondered how this decision would affect their livelihoods and their communities. This decision will shape the financial reality of families and communities for years to come, leaving a lasting mark on the nation's economic story and the daily lives of millions. The road to this Supreme Court case began soon after President Trump's return to office, when he reignited debates over America's role in global trade. He promised a universal baseline tariff on nearly all imports, aiming to protect American industries and jobs. This sweeping proposal was pitched as a way to revive domestic manufacturing and strengthen the nation's economic backbone. Legal challenges erupted immediately, led by corporations, industry groups, and states. Many feared the tariffs would raise costs, disrupt supply chains, and spark trade wars with key allies. They argued the president was overstepping, since the Constitution gives Congress, not the president, the power to regulate foreign commerce. Critics warned that bypassing Congress threatened the balance of power at the heart of American democracy. The administration's defense relied on Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, which lets the president impose tariffs for national security. This rarely used law became the centerpiece of the White House's legal argument. Trump's lawyers claimed economic security is national security, justifying broad emergency powers. They argued that threats to American industries could weaken the country's ability to defend itself. Lower courts issued conflicting rulings, creating legal chaos and paralyzing business decisions. Some judges sided with the administration while others blocked the tariffs, deepening the uncertainty. The business community was left in limbo, unable to plan for the future. Companies delayed investments, workers faced layoffs, and small businesses struggled to adapt. The legal uncertainty highlighted the urgent need for clarity from the Supreme Court. Both sides hoped the justices would finally settle the question of presidential power over trade. The stage was set for a constitutional showdown, with the eyes of the nation and the world watching closely. The outcome would determine whether the president could unilaterally reshape America's trade relationships, or if Congress would reclaim its authority. The stakes were enormous for the economy and the separation of powers. Billions of dollars, thousands of jobs, and the future of American governance hung in the balance. The nation waited for the highest court's answer, knowing that whatever the decision, it would shape the country's economic and political landscape for years to come. This isn't the first time presidential power over trade has clashed with the courts. In 1952, the Supreme Court blocked President Truman from seizing steel mills during the Korean War, setting a precedent on executive limits. Over time, Congress delegated more trade authority to presidents for efficiency, blurring constitutional lines. Trump's use of Section 232 to impose tariffs on allies previewed this conflict. But the Supreme Court previously declined to intervene. This time, the proposed tariffs were so broad the court had to act. The legal debate centered on the non-delegation doctrine. Congress can't hand over its core powers. Challengers argued giving the president unchecked tariff authority was unconstitutional. The court faced a direct test. Had Congress gone too far in delegating, and had the president overreached? The answer would define the limits of executive power in trade. On July 27, 2025, the Supreme Court delivered its verdict, a 6-3 decision against the Trump administration. Chief Justice Roberts wrote that the president's universal tariff plan exceeded authority granted by Congress. The court ruled that while national security justifies some action, sweeping economic measures need a clear congressional mandate. The majority narrowed the scope of Section 232, rejecting an unlimited definition of national security. The decision reaffirmed that Congress cannot delegate its fundamental trade powers to the president. The dissent argued the president should have broad discretion on national security, but the majority disagreed. The immediate effect: Trump's tariffs are blocked. Future presidents will need explicit congressional approval for broad trade restrictions. The ruling shifts trade power back to Capitol Hill, demanding a more collaborative approach. President Trump's response was immediate and explosive. He blasted the Supreme Court on social media, calling the decision a betrayal and an attack on American sovereignty. At a press conference, he accused the justices, even his own appointees, of caving to globalist elites. Trump vowed to keep fighting for his America First agenda, hinting at new executive actions. The White House scrambled to regroup after this major legal defeat. Privately, Trump was frustrated. He'd expected the conservative court to back him. Publicly, he used the ruling to rally his base, framing himself as a president under siege by the establishment. His campaign turned the defeat into a political weapon ahead of the midterms. The battle lines were redrawn, not just against political opponents, but now against the judiciary itself. Wall Street's reaction was swift and dramatic. Stock market futures surged as the threat of a trade war vanished. The Dow, S&P 500, and NASDAQ all opened higher, with relief spreading across trading floors. Companies reliant on global supply chains and exports saw their stocks soar. The risk of retaliatory tariffs evaporated, stabilizing markets and boosting investor confidence. The US dollar dipped slightly, and commodity prices steadied as fears of global slowdown faded. Not all sectors benefited. Domestic steel and aluminum companies, hoping for protection, saw their shares fall. The decision exposed deep divisions in the business community, domestic producers versus multinationals. For most, the ruling brought clarity and optimism. The market celebrated the return of stability and predictability. Investors could finally plan for the future without the shadow of sweeping tariffs. The Supreme Court's decision was a turning point for the economy. Wall Street exhaled. The Supreme Court's decision sent shockwaves far beyond the marble halls of Washington and the financial centers of Wall Street, reaching into the daily lives of ordinary Americans across the country. For consumers everywhere, it meant dodging sudden price hikes on groceries, electronics, and everyday essentials, relief at the checkout line, and a little more room in the family budget. American businesses, especially small manufacturers and local entrepreneurs, gained crucial certainty to plan for the future, hire new workers, and invest in growth, rather than bracing for unpredictable costs. The ruling stabilized costs and preserved jobs in industries deeply dependent on both imports and exports, from factory floors to shipping docks. Socially, the tariff debate had deepened divisions. Some saw protectionism as a way to save American jobs, while others viewed it as a threat to their livelihoods and the broader economy. The decision didn't heal these rifts overnight, but it did prevent an economic shock that could have made them even worse, sparing families from sudden hardship. The job market was spared from a major blow. While a few protected industries may have lost out, many more jobs were saved in sectors closely tied to global trade and supply chains. Exporters in particular avoided retaliatory tariffs that could have forced painful layoffs and cutbacks, keeping American goods moving overseas. The court's action likely prevented a net loss of jobs across the economy, shielding workers in countless industries from uncertainty. For millions of workers and families, the ruling preserved a sense of stability and security, allowing them to focus on their futures. The effects will be felt in boardrooms making big decisions, and at kitchen tables where families plan their lives, echoing across the nation. In the end, the country avoided a costly economic gamble, and Americans everywhere can breathe a little easier. Analysts and scholars are unpacking the long-term impact of this decision. Most economists agree the ruling averted a potential economic crisis and stabilized markets. Legal experts call it a landmark reaffirmation of the separation of powers, forcing Congress to reclaim its constitutional trade role. Critics argue the decision ties the president's hands and favors multinational profits over American workers. The debate over free trade versus protectionism remains fierce. Foreign policy experts say the ruling reassures allies and signals the U.S. isn't abandoning the global trading system. It opens the door to repairing strained alliances and avoiding a trade war. Yet the political appetite for protectionism in America remains strong. The world is watching to see what Trump does next. The decision has shifted the conversation on trade, power, and America's role in the world. The implications will unfold for years. The story is far from over. The Supreme Court's decision is more than a legal ruling. It's a turning point for American power and politics. Authority swings back toward Congress, rebalancing the separation of powers. The era of presidents unilaterally imposing sweeping tariffs is likely over. Future trade policy will require negotiation and collaboration with Congress. This means more moderate, predictable policies, but less swift action. Globally, the decision signals that American democracy and its institutions remain strong. Allies and competitors see a U.S. committed to constitutional order, not isolationism. The ruling brings stability to the global economic order and opens space for diplomacy. The debate over trade will continue, but the rules are now clear. A new chapter in American democracy and global leadership has begun.